Welcome to the Mail Time Podcast. I am joined today by Mike Warren, senior editor at The Dispatch. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
You know, it's ironic because Megyn Kelly and others have gone on about how they're mad about the othering of Tucker Carlson and conservative voices. And I just look at The Dispatch and I look at, oh, wow, if people didn't toe the Trump line exactly to a T, you probably end up writing at The Dispatch. So it's pretty interesting to me how this othering factor is now popping up when it comes to Tucker Carlson and the Heritage Foundation. You're out with, I think, a fantastic article, which is why I invited you here, on hallowed grounds. The Heritage Foundation has abandoned its principles in aligning with Tucker Carlson's populist nationalism. For those who have yet to see your article, can you walk us through it, please?
Sure. And Daniel, this is a sort of a follow-up to the story that we did at the Dispatch, but plenty of other outlets have covered, which is the fallout to Kevin Roberts' defense. Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, his defense of Tucker Carlson after Tucker Carlson had done this now infamous interview with Nick Fuentes, a very softball interview.
I actually don't even consider it an interview. We shouldn't even call it an interview. It was a dinner date.
Yeah, essentially it was very much a friendly conversation on his X show, on Tucker Carlson's X show. And so the sort of follow-up to that story, in which, you know, Kevin Roberts had a lot of blowback from that defense that he gave, not just sort of externally, people who were saying, how could Heritage have sunk to this level, but actually from within the Heritage Foundation. A lot of people there on the board, or people who are on staff, people who had these sort of cross-coalitional agreements or kind of events, and there was an fighting anti-Semitism task force that a lot of sort of outside groups were involved with, that Heritage had organized, who left. A lot of people were angry at him over this. And the story I wanted to tell in this piece that you've had me on hallowed ground, is sort of a way to describe how Tucker Carlson's involvement with the Heritage Foundation, what one former senior staff person said, the way that Tucker has ruined Heritage, that's the word that this person used, goes back a ways. And so I tell the story of the way in which the previous president of Heritage, Kay Coles James, who was there for a little over 3.5 years, was rocked in a lot of ways by the fact that Tucker Carlson went after her directly, and caused a lot of problems with her internally at the Heritage Foundation. And if you read the beginning of the piece, it opens with a story about Tucker calling someone at the Heritage Foundation to say, I'm going to go after Kay Coles James and the Heritage Foundation in my monologue on Fox News tonight. This was back in 2020. And that's exactly what he did. And it really set off a lot of conversations and strategy sessions, and lots of concern within the building at Heritage about what Tucker's anger at the Heritage Foundation, what his calling on donors to the Heritage Foundation, a lot of whom were watching Tucker on Fox, calling on them to not donate anymore. What could be done about this? And I think it tells a story about how we could get from that point to what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, which is a sort of identity crisis within the Heritage Foundation about sort of how tightly to hug people like Tucker Carlson, and the mess that they're in now. I think you can, sort of trace it back to that moment just 5 years ago.
It's also fascinating for me, as I've written about and talked about, that it's not just this video. And I think that that's kind of the brilliance in how people at Heritage people that support Kevin Roberts are definitely pushing that line, and they're saying it was a mistake, this one video. Heritage Foundation was sponsoring Tucker Carlson's podcast to the tune of over $1 million. And Kevin Roberts, in his infamous defense that was leaked, I will proudly say I had the audio first before anyone, but he's saying that he doesn't consume news, he consumes sports. And he's the head of the think tank, and he's talking about his dear friend Tucker Carlson. So this mess is not just a video, and this is not just a 5-minute mistake that some chief of staff wrote. How do you think we got from Tucker attacking then president of Heritage to the Heritage Foundation that sponsors flatly anti-conservative ideas to the tune of millions of dollars?
Look, I think there is also a bigger story going on here, which is what's going on within conservative institutions, whether that is a big think tank like Heritage, whether it's within kind of conservative media or right-wing media within the Republican Party even, which is dealing with this moment that I think we have to say, really begins with Donald Trump's success as a political candidate back in 2016, which surprised even Donald Trump. And what I think you have seen, and Heritage's story is a part of that, is conservative institutions, conservative figures, people for whom kind of this broad right of center conservative movement are, is a form of their sort of income, is a part of their sort of activist career or identity, have had a kind of crisis of what do we do when the people, voters, an audience, in Heritage's case, donors, are sort of going in a direction that is counter to what we've been saying, what we believe, what we've been saying we believe, and what we're trying to do. And, you've seen some who go in a way that says we're going to stay true to what we believe, even if it means a smaller audience or even if it means losing elections. We can all think of people who have lost elections because they stood on principle in a Republican primary, for instance. And I think in Heritage's case, what you have seen is a fight. And I want to say it's an internal fight. I don't think everybody, say, on the Heritage Board of Trustees, certainly not people within the staff of Heritage, are okay with sort of this cozying up to Tucker Carlson. But there's been a fight about it. And the people who have looked at what's going on, this kind of populist energy that manifests in whether it's Donald Trump or Tucker Carlson on television and later on X, have said that's where the energy of this movement is, and we have got to follow them. Maybe not in those exact words, but I think that has been, they always say, follow the money. I think there's a lot of follow the energy here, follow the donors, the Heritage has a lot of support from small dollar donors. It's a lot more like kind of a House candidate than your typical kind of think tank. And I think that pull of where the people are going, where our people, the base of Heritage is going, we must therefore follow, has a lot to do with that. And it leads you into these really kind of ugly and counterproductive cul-de-sacs.
Is there even a debate that's happening? Because for me, as someone who has been out of the space for close to a decade ago, I was focused on other things, and I jumped back in the last couple of years, but I wasn't paying too close attention to some of the inner politics of it. But as I'm now, and I've consumed a lot of these podcasts in the last year, trying to get back up to speed so I could get back into it. But I'm struggling with the level of bad faith argumentation that's happening when we're talking about where the movement is actually going. Because if you look at even how Tucker Carlson's defending his discussion with Nick Fuentes, they all of a sudden make it about platforming and cancel culture. There has been zero attempt at any cancel culture. There's zero attempt at pushing to deplatform people in the way that Nick Fuentes was deplatformed, where his bank didn't work. The TSA stopped him. Nobody is pushing for any of those things. And in fact, I oppose those things. I think that Nick Fuentes was a victim of an insane cancel culture that we can never return to. But how is it that when some of these podcasters and news sources are having this discussion, they're not even discussing the actual issues? And do you think that the economic incentives are aligned, that they really just gaslight and they think their audience is that stupid that that's what they're going to settle for? That's where I'm really struggling to understand the landscape, because I would actually wish we could discuss things such as foreign aid to Israel, or how do we deal with Nick Fuentes's position on immigration. I think those are things you could actually discuss. But these conversations aren't even happening.
Look, I think there are there are sort of a lot of different motivations and considerations that people kind of across this broad movement and kind of space are getting a little crosswise. And it's honestly, we don't have time to sort of go into all of the different sort of ideological strains, but also the kind of career related influences and motivations that are going on here. But in a general sense, I think there's a lot of confusion about what the sort of what the issues are. I think people have thought, well, maybe it's not, maybe the sort of more strident conversations are it's not the way I would do it, but that seems to be the direction. Maybe we should be reconsidering, say, our our relationship with the state of Israel on these things. There's a sort of a sense that maybe we should talk about this, but they don't really have a lot of leadership on this. Because at the top of this kind of big movement, this kind of fuzzy, large, shaggy movement is Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is confusing to a lot of people. He doesn't have sort of a real set of principles. He's got a couple of like areas and viewpoints that he's sort of stuck with consistently, right? He doesn't like trade. He doesn't like sort of unfettered immigration. And that's kind of it. And so everybody else is trying to backfill what Trump is and what Trump represents. And I think most importantly at this point, what's coming after Trump. And people get into a real confused state about that. It's like,
but my question is, why do we have to talk like Donald Trump? That's what I'm saying. He's the leader. He's the one he's the president. I support him. I hope he does amazing stuff. There's so many things he does that I love, and I think he's a tremendous leader. There's so many things he does that I challenge and I have issues with, but that's the nature with any presidency and any leader in any position of power in any government. I would imagine, other than perhaps communist China or North Korea, that you're going to have freedom to have these kinds of discussions. But how come these discussions are not occurring on these spaces in good faith and an educated way? I'm not saying that you can't get clickbait out of it, but why can these people who are supposed to be the stewards of the conversation, why do you have to talk like Trump and being as crass in some ways? And why do they have to just dismiss the other side as somehow either challenging their loyalty to America, challenging if they're even conservative, the othering, the gatekeeping, right? Because what they'll say is, oh, this article came from the New York Times or this article came from the Dispatch, so these people are anti-America. How come they're not actually discussing ideas?
Look, I think there's, I've got 3 kids. They model what I do. And they model how I behave. They even model what the oldest one, the ones that are older than them, do as well. And I think that what you're seeing is a lot of modeling. You sort of, think about this. There's been a lot of debate about the sort of what's happening with younger conservatives, and I think it's a little overblown in terms of how there was Rod Dreher, who's sort of a conservative blogger at the American Conservative, which is kind of a paleo-conservative outlet based in Hungary, and he has said something like 30 to 40% of young Republican staffers in Washington are Groypers, which is the sort of neo-Nazi followers, internet troll followers of Nick Fuentes. I think that's way overblown. I don't know. That seems more like a vibe statement than a sort of scientific statement. But there's this question of what's going on with young people and what are they being pulled into. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, for instance, Donald Trump and the environment that he's created, which I think is confused. I think there's confusion about what conservatism means, what it means to be a Republican, what it means to be, what it means to be and have those conversations. It's all been confused by Donald Trump, and those young people have only known a time when Donald Trump was sort of the leader of the Republican Party, when Tucker Carlson was the sort of #1 media figure in conservative media. And I do think that when you have leaders like that for whom sort of talking in bad faith ways, or in talking in the ways that you sort of decry and say, why do we all have to talk like that? It's a modeling thing, and it's interesting to see where people draw the line. And it's been interesting to me as a journalist to see that line for a lot of people that I would have thought would have been drawn a long time ago at different points in this kind of 8 or 9 year era that we've been living in. That line has been drawn at neo-Nazis like Nick Fuentes, and sort of allowing people like Tucker Carlson to just kind of embrace them. I guess we can be I guess that's heartening in a way that neo-Nazis are a bridge too far, but it does seem like that is a bridge too far for a lot of people. And
well, I think it's they're outright saying it is a bridge too far. Implying things that neo-Nazis would say is not a bridge too far, which is what has a lot of people so alarmed. I also add, I think that it's a little bit downstream from the TPUSA phenomenon. And I was very close with Charlie a decade ago. I knew the Charlie I knew was before he worked for Don Jr. when I was in touch with him on a weekly basis, and we spent a lot of time together. And that was a different Charlie than the Charlie that has been memorialized and obviously emerged on the national stage as he did. I think downstream from TPUSA turning politics into a rock concert and making it with the smoke and the fanfare, right. And the danger with that is that Nick Fuentes is insanely good at what he does. His show is insanely entertaining. He is one of the few people in America that can truly carry multiple hours of live streaming and be engaging almost the entire time. Now, he might be saying insane concepts and very offensive material, but remember, these people have been told that if you're a Christian white man, that you need to repent for the sins of your grandfather's grandfather. So they're not going to accept any of, they're actually inclined to be supportive of that. And I think we might be seeing some of the downstream effects of basically making entertainment out of it, because he is really entertaining. Instead of watching some boring show on one of the cable news channels at 11:30 at night, not talking about Greg Gutfield, but other people, you're going to you might turn on Nick Fuentes because he's entertaining. And for a lot of young people, it's not even, you're basically attacking their main source of entertainment. It's not even on a political level. I don't think these people are actually neo-Nazis. They're not, I think most of his audience is not sitting there saying, let me go find a Jew. Right. In fact, I'm not even convinced that Nick is saying that. It's actually more that he, as an entertainment value, is really good at what he does. And the question is, this is the bed that the Republican Party made, and now they have to sleep in it. And how do you take out this cancerous tumor? I'm not really sure how to effectively do it, because in my position, I'm curious your take on this. I think that some of the attempt to put guardrails now is it's echoing some of the Jeb Bush Trump stuff. I'm not saying it's exactly the same. There are key differences, but I'm not sure that audience listens when they're getting talked to in a very patronizing way. What's your take?
I think you're certainly correct that if the audience isn't receptive, then there's not a lot you can do. But I will say that if you view this through the metaphor of this kind of this kind of entertainment as politics, or politics as entertainment, and going to these extremes of neo-Nazi rhetoric. If you view that as being sort of cancerous, getting rid of it, like treating cancer, is painful. It is destructive in a lot of ways. I mean, like that is what treating cancer is. You are destroying parts of the body in order to kill the cancer. And I think that is why sort of rooting this kind of thing out is so difficult. It's because a lot of people have, in some ways, understandably good reasons to not want to, go through that chemotherapy, if you will, of doing this. But it's also risks killing the entire body. And I think if we zoom out a little bit here, what we've been talking about is sort of internal within a movement within a political party, right? The conservative movement is not the entirety of the Republican Party. It's a significant portion of it. But if the Republican Party wants to sort of win, continue to win in the long term, they have to win sort of a majority of the country, for whom I would imagine a lot of this stuff is not what they're signing up for. And you can look at like Donald Trump, I think, as I think a lot of people want to think of Donald Trump as sort of an avatar for this movement. I think he's more than that, and I think he's different from the sort of far right Groyperism or whatever. He sort of co-opts that, and they maybe see him as a potential champion. But his appeal is so much more broad. And if the Republican Party and the conservative movement sort of gets taken in by this writ large, I think they're going to have a bad time. I think this is the challenge of, say, J.D. Vance candidacy in 2028, and you're already starting to see those kind of battle lines being drawn, because who has been speaking out kind of pretty forcefully against Tucker Carlson and against this sort of soft embrace of anti-Semitic rhetoric? It's Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas. Guess who might want to run for president in 2028?
Right.
Might be on a debate stage against, say, a J.D. Vance. Ted Cruz. I think that's where this is all going, and I don't think it's going to work out well for the bad faith neo-Nazi element of this movement.
Well, I want to make one point though, which I think what Tucker understood, and Tucker is also very good at what he's doing.
Absolutely.
He is brilliant at the gaslighting. He is the most talented gaslighter I think I've ever seen. And the language he uses and the way that he weaves these arguments to be very, if you're not paying close attention, you don't really know what he's talking about. Part of this issue is they've also made it about Jews and anti-Semitism. Whereas if you look at what he was actually bringing into the party by trying to give a softball interview to Nick Fuentes, was actually broader bigotry, broader racism in ways that are completely expunged from polite society, and no normative conservative thinker entertains those ideas. And that's where it's actually a threat. But he made it all about the Jews because he keeps trying to make it about some sort of nefarious force controlling the Congress, controlling the decisions, blackmailing people, destabilizing politics in Europe. These are all things that were said on podcasts sponsored by Heritage. So he's making it about this kind of greater cabal instead of dealing with a more fundamental, actually pretty broad coalition of people that are completely repulsed by these insane ideas. Before I let you go, what do you think shakes out with Kevin Roberts here in Heritage? Do you think that this leader will stay on board? Do you think he makes it out of here?
At the moment, it seems like he has weathered that. I think it's a fact that he has weathered the initial storm. There was actual talk that perhaps in the sort of days after that initial video came out, that he was going to be booted potentially by the board. That clearly did not happen. And but what's interesting to me is, that video came out. We're recording this on Friday, November 14th. That video came out over 2 weeks ago from when we're recording this, and stories keep coming out. I've seen just this week, more people are resigning either from Heritage itself or from their sort of big anti-Semitism task force. Again, outside groups that are a part of that who are resigning or distancing themselves. I just know internally that people are not pleased with how Roberts has handled this. Can he survive with a board that is sort of really, like many of these institutions, trying to just make it all go away and not have to make hard and difficult decisions? The medium term is, I think, the big question. Can he survive in the medium term? And what would it mean if he were given the boot? Who would they bring in to take over this institution? I just think there's a lot of questions. But at the moment, he seems to be writing it out, even as all of this attention. Look, I will say this, Daniel. I thought a week ago that we would not be talking about this still, and yet here we are. I think that tells you that this story and this problem for Heritage is not going away.
I would just say that if Heritage can pay for Tucker to fluff up Dave Smith and Jeffrey Sachs, then they should just bring them on as scholars at this point. I mean, you're paying for it. It's a better return on investment than the one-time hit on a podcast.
I mean,
but he doesn't,
as Tucker told me over text when I was reporting for this story, I try to stay away from think tank people in general. They're boring and dumb. So,
his father helped found the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
So
Yeah, I think his father was also, perhaps not religiously, but he was technically a Christian Zionist who he said was now heretical. So,
we all, I guess some apples fall far from the tree. I don't know.
This is true. Mike Warren, The Dispatch, thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate it.